Hi everyone, Mr. Dingle here again for the second video of the side scroller tutorial. In this video I want to go through how we're going to script the player controller script in particular and set up the player in a couple of ways. So the first thing we're going to do, we're just going to set up the player with a couple of extra things. So first of all, he's called Cube and that's not very cool. Let's call him Player. Very complicated that one is. Okay. And the second thing that we're going to do is we're just going to add a rigid body to this guy. And that's going to handle all the physics and things like that. Now, the rigid body is actually going to be what we use to move him vertically and horizontally and do a couple of other things. And the main reason for that is I've tried other things like character controllers and add forces and things like this and translates. But the rigid body velocity seems to be the best way to move the character and handle gravity automatically for you. It seems to be smooth and easier. It's got a few bugs, but it's probably, out of all of them, the best solution that I've found so far. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to do, let's have a look at the script. Okay, so I'm going to double click to open this up in MonoDevelop. Okay, hopefully that's big enough for you all to see. And what we're going to start doing is setting up the horizontal movement to start with. So what you've got to do when you start scripting is think of scripting as problem solving. Okay, so the thing about that is we're going to start with the simplest problem possible, and the first problem that we're going to deal with is the horizontal movement of the player. Okay, moving left and right. And it's really simple to do. So the first thing that we're going to do is just have a quick look at what's called a parameter. Now, since we've already set up the smooth follow script on here, I'm going to use this as an example. All right, we've got 5 parameters down here. We've got target, distance, height damping, and rotation damping. These are considered parameters because they don't change the script, okay, but they affect how it works. So what I mean by that is the target allocates obviously what the camera is going to follow or what the object's going to follow, the distance it follows it at, the height, and the damping sets the speed at which it follows it. So all of these change the way that the script behaves. Okay, it doesn't change the script itself, but just it changes a little bit about its behavior. Okay, and we're going to use one of these for the horizontal speed of the player, and we're going to use a couple in each of the scripts that we use. And to easily set that up to start with, we're going to go up the top and type VAR for variable. You type in the name of the parameter, which in this case is speed. Okay, a colon, and you say what type this parameter is going to be. You can see that we've got 2 different types here. One's called a transform, which is the location of something, and numbers down the side. So these, what we're going to use is a number, and specifically a float. All right, leaving the line like this with a semicolon at the end tells Unity that the default value of speed will be 0. Okay, in this case we don't want 0 to be the default speed. We want 4 to be the default speed. So what we do is just go float equals 4. And that sets the default speed for us. Okay, if I save the script by clicking that button or even Control S, as you can see there, and jumping back to Unity, letting it update, yep, and putting the script on top of the player, okay, bam, right there we can see speed 4. Alright, what we can actually do is change the speed of that. Let's say we wanted to make them a bit faster initially, we could set that to 8. If we jump back to the script, you may notice it doesn't change it there at all. Okay, that's just the default, and we've just said we don't want the default, we want 8. In this case, I've played around with this value a fair bit. I've tried the lower values and the higher values, and 4 seems to be a good middle number. It's good to go. So after we've set that up, what we're going to do is we're going to get rid of function update because we're not going to use, function start, because we're not going to use function start in the slightest. And the second thing we're going to do, where it says function update, this is used to do things while the game is running, and that's what we want. But because we're dealing purely with a rigid body, we need to do fixed update, which is the better way to handle things. So update is used for checking things and using translates and character controllers. Fixed update is where you're dealing specifically with rigid bodies, and that's really what this is. Okay? And what we're going to do is I'm just going to quickly add in one line of code which is going to handle the horizontal movement of our player. All right. The first thing I like to do is put in 2 forward slashes and put a comment in there of what we're just about to do. So handle the horizontal movement of the player. All right. This line here, line 7, is actually ignored by Unity. Okay, it's just for our eyes. It just makes things a lot easier to look at and a lot nicer to figure out what's going on. Because we're going to add a lot of code to this, and it's going to look pretty complex by the end. So these comments should hopefully break it down and make it easier for us to look at. All right. Now, because I'm using rigid bodies, we need to start actually adding some code. So we're going to go rigid body dot something, and I like to use velocity. Now, there's a couple of ways we can change the speed of rigid bodies. You can use velocity or you can use add force. I found add force a slow process. Velocity is instant, it just works. So I like the way the velocity works. Okay, and we have to put a dot after velocity, and we have to figure out what are we going to use. Are we going to use X, Y, or Z? Right, and there's a couple of tricks to that. If we jump back to the editor, all right, we need to figure out, okay, which way are we going to move? Are we going to move the X, are we going to move the Y, or are we going to move the Z? All right, and it's pretty easy. If you move this thing left and right, you can see up here that it's changing the X value. The Y is the jump value, and the Z we don't want to use. We don't want to fall off the edges. Okay, so what we are going to do is we're going to change the X value to the speed. Okay, so we're actually using the number, and so basically what we're saying here, by default, rigid body velocity X, so left and right, equals 4, which for the moment isn't what we want to do, but it's just as an example. Let's have a look at how that works. Okay, 4, set up, let's press play, and he rolls along and then he falls off. Alright, so we've got 3 problems there that we need to fix. First problem is he's obviously falling off. Okay, and the way he falls off is this Z value is changing from 0. We don't want that ever in this game. We want him to stay on the platform 100% of the time. So what we're going to do is under our rigid body, we're going to utilize these constraints. If you can't see them, okay, it means that it's just rolled up. You just need to unroll it. And we're not going to freeze the X, that's our left and right movement. We're not going to freeze Y, that's our jumping. We are going to freeze the Z. And that'll fix our first problem. Let's have a look at how that responds now. You'll see Z doesn't change at all. That works perfectly. Okay, except for I personally don't like the rolling. I think it actually interferes with a fair few things. If you like the rolling, you can keep it, but I'm going to show you how to get rid of it right now, and you can change it later. We're going to use freeze rotation, and I'm going to freeze X, the Y, and the Z. Okay, so when I press play, smooth gliding, and you can see him moving along. That's exactly what I want. That's how we want our horizontal movement to work. Now, third problem, we're not in control. Okay, so that actual problem lies under the script. Okay, and what we're going to utilize here is a thing called input.getAxis. Okay, and the axis name is horizontal. So what we've actually said there is this is the keyboard and mouse input system. It even handles controllers and joysticks, but we won't get into that. And horizontal refers to 4 keys. It refers to the left arrow, the right arrow, the A key, and the D key. All right. And so A and the left obviously refer to the left direction, and D and the right key refer to the right direction. And what happens is as we press the left direction, this line here produces a -1 value. As we press the right direction, it produces a +1 value. If we're not pressing anything, it produces a 0 value. So if you imagine this, if we're not pressing any key, we've got the number 4 times by 0, which means the velocity on the X will be 0. Okay, so let me quickly explain that again. Whoop. In a little bit more of an obvious way. Let's have an example there. So, if speed has the value 4, okay, and we're timesing by, let's just say, horizontal, and its value at the moment is 0, then obviously the answer will be 0. So the character is not going to move at all. But if we're pressing the left-hand direction, okay, it's going to produce a -1 value for horizontal. So the final value will be -4. And the character will start heading in the left-hand direction. That's the same for if we press the right arrow, it produces a 1 value. And so that's going to make the character move in the right-hand direction. So, long-winded explanation, but let's save this and jump back to Unity. hit play. That's me pressing left and right. I can't jump at the moment, but that's perfect. That's the left and right hand movement out of the way. Done. 100%. Okay, if you think it's moving too slow, up it a little bit later on, but I think right now that's perfect. Okay. What we should move on to now is adding in the jumping. Okay. So when they press the space bar, we jump up in the air and we let gravity pull us back down. Okay, that's the best way to go about it. All right. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do just like we did with the horizontal movement. We're going to add in a sort of a speed or jump height up the top. So I'm going to go var jump height, and there's a reason I capitalize the H and not the J. It's going to be a float as well, and I found a good number for that is 5 by default. Okay, so I'll show you why I didn't capitalize J and I did capitalize H. If you jump back to the editor, click on your player, see how that separates the words jump and height. Jump height. It's pretty good. Okay, and that's all because I capitalized that H there. That's the only reason I did it. Alright, so time to add a bit of code for it, hey? I'm going to add a comment. Now, we only want to jump when they press the space bar on the keyboard. So this is going to be pretty straightforward. We're going to use a function under input again, but we're not going to use getAxis, we're going to use getButton. Alright, and the button name that we want is jump. Whoops, sorry, capital J. Just like so. Okay, with if statements, notice how I've got 1 open bracket, 2 open brackets, and so I have to close 2 at the end. Okay, and what we do after an if statement is you open up a curly brace, go down a couple of lines, and close it off. Okay, you can see it highlights the pair of braces, and you need to make sure that you have that. I like to tab across in an if statement because it's good practice. It looks nice. Okay, and so we're going to do basically the same thing we did here. All right, except for we can just, because we know they've hit this jump button, all we need to do is set the Y velocity to the jump height. So it's a matter of just doing rigid body dot velocity dot Y this time, because we want to go up, equals jump height. And that's literally all we're going to do for this particular case. Now there's a problem here, but right now hopefully that should work. So let's jump to the game, give it a quick test. And there you go. Now here's the problem. If I keep hitting space, if I hold it down, whee, I float in the air. That's a big problem. Okay, so what we need to do is we can't let the player jump if they already are in the air. Okay, we could add a double jump or a triple jump or something like that, but for the basics of this game, we're adding a single jump. They have to be touching the ground before they can jump again, or touching something before they can jump again. So what we're actually going to do, we're going to bring in what's called a raycast. Alright, and before I go too quick, I want to explain this concept, give you the basics of it, and then you can use it, okay? Now, a raycast is basically like shooting a laser beam from one point in a certain direction, okay? And if it hits something, it tells you where it hit it, how far away it was, and things like that. You can also use a raycast to shoot between 2 positions in the game, and it may hit something on the way or it may not, okay? It's a good way to control gunshots, okay, if enemies are going to walk around the screen, things like that. A raycast can be used for lots and lots of different things. So in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to shoot a ray straight down from the object, okay? If we don't hit anything, okay, we're in the air and we can't jump. If we hit something, we are grounded, or that's the concept we're going to use, grounded, and we're allowed to jump, okay? So what we are going to do is we're going to write what we call our own custom function. So just down here on line 18, you'll notice that there's the end bracket fixed update. We're going to write our own function here. Okay, function is grounded. Okay, just like fixed update, brackets, curly, close the curly. All right, so this function is going to tell us, are we on the ground or are we not on the ground? Okay, comment, fire a raycast to check for the ground. All right, that's all this is going to do. And what we're going to do, a raycast can look pretty complicated, but bear with me. Okay, we go physics.raycast. Alright, and see how it says origin, direction, vector, as a vector, and distance. So origin, direction, distance. So the origin is obviously going to be the player, which is represented by transform.position. Alright. The direction that we want to shoot is downwards. Okay, and you get that direction from vector3.down. Okay, and that's always the same. Always. Okay. From there, we want to say how far down, the distance in which we want to shoot. Now, a raycast will always start in the middle of an object. So what I mean by that, if you imagine is in our game, and we shoot a raycast, the raycast will start from exactly in the middle of the object. Okay, so we need to penetrate all the way through to the bottom, and then a tiny little bit. Okay? So, this is actually quite easy. Okay? To get the size of the object, we go collider.bounds.extents.y. Okay? And so if we were firing a raycast to the left or the right, we would use .x instead. And what I'm going to do is just add a tiny amount, okay, just to see if the floor is just underneath us. Alright? Okay, now this isn't finished. We just have to add one little thing on the front. This raycast, what it does is it returns what you call, you'll see on the end, it returns a boolean. So a boolean is true or false. If we hit an object, this whole raycast will return true. Okay, if we hit nothing, it will return false. So what we're going to do is just put return in front of it. So is grounded will produce a true or a false if we're touching the ground. All of that is just to check if we're touching the ground. Okay, and then we're going to apply this to line 12, this if statement. If they're pressing jump, and then we go ampersand. So if they're pressing jump and is grounded, don't forget we need extra brackets there, empty ones. Okay, so if we press the jump button and we're grounded, we set the velocity. So let's save this quickly. Let's jump back and test that this works 100%. You can even hold down the space bar because we use get button. It works. We can even jump while we're moving along. You can jump up and down, but you can't double or triple jump or even quadruple jump for that matter. Rightio. So this has been a long video. I'm going to stop here. When you come back, we're going to finish off this script with super speed hitting and a very annoying bug that I spent a long time trying to fix. See you in the next video.